Walter Benjamin, the original aura farmer, used aura with reference to art. He described the aura of a piece of art as its unique existence in time and space, an interpretation derived from perception. It encompasses the experiences of contemplation, admiration, reflection, and analysis. For example, the Mona Lisa, as you stand beneath her in the Musée du Louvre, the silence filled only with the occasional musings of a Frenchman. The sensory embodiment of the encounter and the experience as you contemplate, admire, reflect, and analyze dear Lisa, Benjamin would describe as aura. It is derived from the sense of authenticity, reverence, and immediacy that comes from the object's originality and history. Maximum aura is experienced when these components are also maximized, and as such you would experience the Mona Lisa's maximum aura as you stand beneath her in the Louvre. Benjamin's sentiment in his paper on the mechanical reproduction of art, where he introduces us to the concept of aura, is that reproduction results in aura decay. A picture of the Mona Lisa does not elicit the same emotions as the original painting would. You can understand that this person would be experiencing more aura than this person. So whilst reproduction can democratize art, what you experience from it is a diminished version of its original aura. Reproduction similarly democratizes fragrance. In the current landscape of mass marketing and social media, the perception of scent and the aura of fragrance itself has undergone a process of decay. Originality is one of the core components of the colloquialized version of aura, and whilst accessibility allows many people to experience something, own something, it makes it less exclusive. And if you are familiar with the concept of chiconomics, you'll understand that the feeling of exclusivity induced by a lack of exposure is essential in its definition of chic. In case you're unfamiliar, chiconomics is the science of fashion trends. When something is new, we have little exposure to it, and it feels exclusive. But over time, as our exposure increases due to such factors as influencer marketing, ads, and ubiquity amongst muggles, chic value depletes. Benjamin would translate this as aura decay, and the same mechanisms apply with fragrance. Perfume was once considered a deeply personal expression of taste, an extension of social and aesthetic identity.
Golden Rolex, red Ferrari, Jeremy fragrance.
If any of you listen to Miss Tuba Avalon, I'm sure you'll be well acquainted with Pierre Bourdeaux. But in any unfortunate case where you're yet to watch a Tuba video, I should introduce him now. Bourdeaux considered the expression of taste as a function not only of personal preference, but as a social marker of class through displays of refinement. He suggested that taste is a form of cultural capital, a resource through which we assert both belonging to the social groups we believe to be refined, and distance from those that we believe not to be. So with regard to our discussion of fragrance, choice of perfume cannot be attributed merely to personal preference, but to the assertion of status. As fragrance has become increasingly commodified by trends, the distinction of a once subtle perfume becomes blurred by our overexposure to shared marketable identity. Bourdeaux, Benjamin, and the principle of chiconomics share the same theory. Aura decays with the proliferation of exposure. Through algorithmic trends, influencer marketing, celebrity endorsements, and viral TikTok moments, the originality of fragrance has become a symbol of conformity. One perfume is reproduced over and over, worn by millions, everyone smelling the same, and its aura is diluted by repetition. That scent no longer suggests uniqueness, refinement, but symbolizes our participation in a collective performance of taste, where our identity is mediated through marketing rather than individuality. It is a very recent cultural phenomenon that the highest compliment someone wishes to receive is to be told that they smell good. But when we say this with reference to the smell of someone's perfume, we are acknowledging the signs of status inscribed within it, because we would similarly say something smells good when we smell something cooking.
Something smells good.
And yet this translates emotionally to something else entirely. If your Hinge date turned up smelling of spaghetti, you wouldn't say, oh, you smell good. Similarly, if your pasta smelled like duty free, you wouldn't be saying it smells good either. The smell of a person is more symbolic. Complimenting the smell of a dish is essentially you anticipating it'll taste nice. Whereas Bourdeaux would argue that a person smelling good is an accumulation of symbolic knowledge he calls cultural capital, the unspoken literacy of taste that allows us to observe the distinction between the unique and layered fragrance of a handsome European man from the commercial best-selling aftershave that reminds you of boys in school. For example, Axe, or Lynx as we affectionately know it in England, is owned by Unilever and sold at a pocket money price point, resulting in its popularity as a fragrance for teenage boys. Unfortunately for Lynx, you cannot isolate the actual smell of Lynx from the cultural context of the smell. I'm not sure about my boys over in the US, but over here, Lynx Africa has reached meme status. But I personally believe that this was almost the intention. Every perfume campaign tries to sell sex, but Lynx tried to make it funny, and unfortunately it's weakened their brand as a fragrance because you end up smelling like a joke. And you may argue that Lynx is not a cologne, so whatever, it's not really that important. But is this not worse? That a deodorant is not about hygiene, but about sexual power? I don't know, to me that's weird. But I think, to be honest, this is why the marketing is so effective for teenage boys. Why get a deodorant to stop you from smelling when it can get you girls? In any case, marketing exploits this grammar of distinction. We are not simply being sold objects, we are being sold belonging. A promise that to own the right scent is to be recognized as someone who knows, aka IYKYK. Selling a pleasant smell is easy, yet only the most talented marketers communicate semiotic fluency, the ability to read and reproduce the codes of taste through branding. This dynamic explains why we are so willing to believe in an influencer when they tell us the perfume is extraordinary.
This scent is derived from an extinct flower in Hawaii. They are the most unique fragrances I have ever experienced.
Their endorsement carries cultural authority. We understand as the content consumer that the creator is in possession of a membership to a class of people whose taste we wish to emulate. If the brand is smart enough, the influencer chosen to front a campaign will reflect the brand's identity. The aura of the influencer and the aura of the brand must align in order to present a believable narrative. The influencer acts as a Bourdain figure, the tastemaker, and this is why choice of influencer, in fragrance campaigns in particular, is so important, because an influencer cannot endorse scent through demonstration. As the consumer of the influencer, we cannot smell what we see, and so the brand relies on the consumer simply believing the influencer. As such, we find ourselves not buying a scent, but buying the taste and identity that the influencer represents. This phenomenon is not isolated to social media marketing or influencer culture. I remember watching Darren Brown present an audience with a bottle of highly concentrated peppermint extract.
So the moment you smell it, it will only be faint. Please put your hand up.
He opened the bottle and asked the audience to raise their hands when they could smell it. That bottle had water in it.
So here's the twist. That is not peppermint oil. That's actually just water.
Revealing how easily sensory experience can become shaped by suggestion and authority. Darren Brown's credibility as the psychological mind-reading, magician, scientist. I don't know, whatever. But if you're sitting in the audience, you believe him. This gives his narrative weight, and you believe him to such an extent that you experience what he is merely suggesting. Influencer marketing functions in the same fashion. The influencer occupies a position of perceived authority. The influencer is believed to be credible for having good taste. So when the influencer says, "This smells good," us as the content consumer respond not to the fragrance itself, because we can't smell it, but to the creator's cultural capital.
I've seen a video of Molly May saying it's like her favourite perfume and she doesn't gatekeep. It genuinely smells so unreal. This is like Molly May's favourite perfume. It is just unreal.
Demonstrating that aura is nothing more than collective conviction. Benjamin posits that aura refers to the unique presence an object possesses, but in these examples, both Darren and our influencer dismantle this and expose the idea that presence is produced through belief. The audience didn't actually smell the peppermint because there was no peppermint. He has the credible, perceived authority to create smell through suggestion. Aura only exists because we agree it does. I'm sure you've all heard of it because you're very intelligent over here on the Ash Callaghan channel, but in any case you haven't, for the imposters watching. In 1961, Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment where participants were assigned teacher roles in a study that they were told by a scientist in a white lab coat was on learning and memory. They were told to press a button every time the scientist told them to.
The teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
And every time they did, they would hear a scream of agony from behind a wall in which they believed the learner to be. At every wrong answer the learner gave, the scientist instructed the teacher to press the button, and every time it was pressed, the screams became louder and more agonizing. The majority of participants continued to press the button despite showing visible signs of distress and questioning the scientist.
"I can't stand the pain! Let me out of here!"
Can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man, eh? I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next with slow.
All the way to the end of the experiment, where the concluding button press resulted in silence from behind the wall.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering with less voltage.
The Milgram experiment demonstrated that authority, when symbolically legitimized, in this case by a white coat, can override sensory evidence and moral intuition. They pressed this button until they thought they killed someone, because a scientist told them to. The scientist telling them to press the button held a perceived authority, credible enough to kill someone. With reference to fragrance, when an influencer tells you a perfume smells good, their perceived authority and credibility as a tastemaker leads us to believe them. We can't smell it, but they can, and we trust them. The popularity of the influencer acts as social validation that their opinions are correct and reflect good taste. And it is this collective agreement, demonstrated by number of followers as an example metric, by us as content consumers, that sustains the illusion. Therefore, aura, if we define it as we have, cannot therefore be an intrinsic quality of an object, but of a socially manufactured response to perceived authority. Social media and the digital age has created a paradox in the realm of fragrance. We buy perfume without having smelt it. We are no longer buying based on olfactory experience, but on semiotic cues. A consumer proficient in the symbolic literacy of sense will understand that oud implies opulence, musk implies intimacy, white florals imply femininity. Brands utilize this understanding to allow the consumer to project their own sensory associations, an imagined sensory congruence, if you will, exploiting the ability to simulate olfactory sensation through visual or linguistic cues. Evidence for this phenomenon can be found in the marketing of baccarat rouge. Its rise in popularity did not stem from the tradition of spraying a little piece of paper in a department store with copious amounts of liquid from a bottle, but from digital semiotics. Red glass, gold typography, and ad briefs that require influencers to use certain language that evokes wealth, exclusivity, and sensuality. So despite baccarat rouge being first released in 2014, its popularity seemed to begin at the launch of TikTok as we currently know it, at least. And ever since, the popularity of both variables is parallel, suggesting that social media has had a great influence in the popularity of baccarat rouge. Furthermore, baccarat rouge was the most popular perfume in 2022, suggesting that the success of a perfume no longer depends on its scent, but on its ability to perform well within the digital marketplace. And so if we believe this to be true, it must also be true that symbolism and social and cultural value are more important factors in selling perfume than its scent. This case encapsulates the logic of imagined sensory congruence. Through collective linguistic and visual association, we as consumers construct an internal simulation of how perfume must smell. The literal sense of smell is supplanted by social meaning, and as such we might now consider the perfume to be less so a scent, but more a vessel for the performance of taste, status, and belonging. This is not a unique phenomenon confined to fragrance. The mechanisms of imagined sensory congruence are very popular in the use of food in fashion marketing. In this context, the alignment is no longer between sight and smell, but between sight and taste. Fashion campaigns have recently been saturated with pictures of indulgent desserts, fresh vegetables, and butter. The choice of produce is carefully selected to evoke a certain emotion, but the choice is not just based on the taste in the literal sense, but also in the figurative sense, on what the food represents. So instead of simulating the taste of whatever food is being used by the marketing team, it is, as Benjamin would say, the aura that is simulated. You can see this all over TikTok and Pinterest, that people are matching food with fashion, food with fragrance, food with literary preference. And I think what we are seeing is a flip in the narrative. Instead of food simulating the desirability of a product, we see the product simulating the desirability of the food. For example, in this image, you may align more with the supposed output, and so you reverse the equation. Instead of being influenced to buy what is being marketed, what is being marketed influences what you eat. And then we find ourselves in the age-old sticky situation of making certain foods fashionable, and for the mental and physical health of probably more so the female population, but let's just say as the general population as a whole, this is a bad idea. Because in this case, the diet is not being pushed for its nutritional value, but for its aura. And when this is a desirable aura, a diet consisting of this is not going to end well. Furthermore, just to drive home how much of a bad idea this is, it's not even going to end badly if this becomes your diet, but also if it does not. Because it's propaganda like this that suggests that you are only cool if you eat this, and so if you don't eat this, you are not cool. Anyway, I think this is a discussion for another video, so if you want to have the conversation, do help yourselves in the comment section below. I shall join you as I see fit. Anyway, fragrance, like fashion, follows trends. What we now understand to be clean girl aesthetic is just the most current and refined rebrand of what we would consider minimalism to be in the 2010s. Clean girl aesthetic is a result of minimalism being filtered through cultural eras of self-care and wellness, influencer individualism, and the rise of hyperfemininity, marking a neglect of 2010 minimalism's original architectural and philosophical influences. Clean girl aesthetic is a branch of minimalism as a result of filtration expansion and refinement through the 2010s, and as such I would consider it correct to suggest that before there was clean girl aesthetic, there was minimalism. One of the first brands to capitalise on the breakdown and refinement of minimalism into its aesthetic was Glossier. 2014 saw the colloquial conception of the term no makeup makeup, a beauty branch of the aesthetic component of minimalism. Glossier was the embodiment of this trend, founded in 2014 at no makeup makeup's peak. In 2017, minimalism reached its own peak, so it's no surprise that this is when Glossier became popular, as it was one of the only brands identifying with the minimal makeup and skincare at the time, where the most popular trend at the time was actually full glam, smoky eye, filled in eyebrows a la Jeffree Star, James Charles, so in the scheme of things there was actually little competition. At the start of Glossier's rise in popularity in 2017, they released their first fragrance, Glossier You, which was popular, but its popularity was limited by the Jeffree Star effect. It wasn't until the conception of the clean girl aesthetic in 2022 that it reached its full potential. By then, Glossier was already an established brand, and so when the full glam look fell out of favour, it was the natural replacement. With the rise of the clean girl aesthetic and Glossier's cultural value, their fragrance You garnered correlating attention, suggesting that this fragrance wasn't bought for its scent, but its semiotic value, a tool for performing alignment with the clean girl aesthetic. Rather than smelling nice, you simply owned Glossier You. No matter what it actually smelt like, owning a piece of the clean girl aesthetic was more important. Currently, we are experiencing clean girl fatigue. To fill the clean girl void, the most popular trend circa 2025 AD
AI. Do you use AI? Do you use ChatGPT?
is individuality and authenticity. As you might expect if you are listening carefully, this cultural turn is mirrored in fragrance. So with the same sentiment in mind, in order to adhere to this new aesthetic, if you want to call authenticity an aesthetic, which to be honest, I think it is, you must smell authentic and individual. But notice how these are not scents. We have completely dismantled the expectation that perfume should smell nice. This is reflected in the rise of popularity of fragrance houses like labo and byredo. Labo was supposedly created as a scent revolution and desire to rebel against the rising tide of conformity. Where traditionally fragrance has been quite heavily gendered, for example floral and sweet for women, and woody and musky for men, Le Labo combined scent profiles to create a unisex fragrance. The androgyny supposedly allows the wearer to project their own identity onto the scent. The genderless composition, clear liquid, and anti-brand concepts like the illusion of a hand-stamped label, claims that every perfume is handmade to order and poured upon purchase, and the lack of celebrity or influencer marketing is all a marketing technique in itself, to create the illusion of individuality, projecting the idea that the wearer imparts their own identity, making it more than a mass-produced object. But you know who had the same idea? The visually inept of us will not see a difference between the two. I know I can't. Both the Labo and Byredo make fragrances that traditionally would have been considered unpleasant for being too animalic or smoky, because there has been a sociological shift from the desire to smell pleasant to the desire to smell different. This pursuit of individuality is a paradox. In the age of mass production and consumerism, authenticity has become a commodity. The rhetoric of realness that brands like Le Labo and Byredo are marketing to us with androgynous, raw, handmade, anti-trend promises are just another layer of branding. These markers of originality have become aesthetics in themselves, endlessly replicated and reproduced. And so it stands to reason that if we assume Benjamin was correct in his theory of aura decay, the sustained repetition of consumer behaviours based on the desire to be unique results only in the illusion of individuality. The desire to smell unique ultimately collapses into the same logic as the desire to look fashionable, which is why we now cringe at the idea of doing too much, because paradoxically, individuality looks the same, and unfortunately, following the same reasoning, individuality also smells the same. But what if we do actually consider buying and wearing perfume or cologne for its scent? This final section is for the unks watching. Who actually value the smell of their cologne over its identity. For those of you who understand the meaning of a top and a bottom, who choose their scent based not on research, virality, exclusivity, or popularity within the niche fragrance community, which in itself is also a paradox, but on smell. How radical. Maybe you smell like the bottle you bought in a foreign country. The bottle you haggled a Moroccan man for, that you couldn't even read the label of, let alone recognise the brand. But you enjoyed the smell of. No prior knowledge, no hype, no commodified identity portrayed by marketing, influenced only by smell, and maybe a little bit by the Moroccan sales pitch. and the thrill of a haggle, but mostly by smell. In 2014, Subert and friends found that there was a positive correlation between the pleasantness of a smell and our perception of beauty. Participants were placed in a room that either smelled nice or smelled like fish, and were literally asked,
"What would you rate this girl on a scale of 1 to 10?
Those in the nice smelling room rated her as more attractive than those in the room that smelled bad, demonstrating that a pleasant smell makes you sexy by influencing and altering visual perception. Essentially, to smell good is to look good. Notice in this experiment how the smell that was influencing perception was blind. There was no identity associated with the smell, just a pleasant smell or an unpleasant smell. When scent is isolated from its identity as a product and experienced only as a chemical, it is moderation, not excess, that attracts. Heavy use of cologne or aftershave a la Lynx Africa masks the smell of being someone potentially attractive. You want your cologne to harmonize with your body chemistry, not compete with it. From an evolutionary point of view, you can essentially smell if someone is going to make good babies. There is not necessarily a certain smell of wellness. There is, however, a smell of illness, and if you are attempting to medicate your halitosis with your sauvage, maybe this podcast is a waste of time. But anyway, there is, however, a smell of compatibility. And when you drown this with cologne, you stop signaling nice, friendly, superior species, ideal mate, and start signaling danger, chemical warfare. There's a threshold, okay? You want to be just above the detectable level so that there is still that unconscious response to compatibility. So really, it's not a smell in the sense that it is a fragrance, because you respond below the conscious level to it. But when you match a fragrance with the right intensity, it has the potential to increase the level of attraction people feel towards you. As well as intensity, you want congruence. A Czech zoologist, which I found quite funny, found that wearing your own perfume is more attractive than wearing a randomly assigned perfume. So by that conclusion, there must be some kind of interaction between yourself and your preferred fragrance, because it smells better than an interaction between yourself and a random fragrance. So what does that mean in practical terms? You don't want to smother yourself in perfume, or you will lose the yourself part of that interaction that ultimately makes you smell more attractive. As I said earlier, perfume marketing is based on sex, because you can't smell the marketing. You know, gingerbread men smell nice, but fragrance, as I said earlier, is more than just smelling nice. But unlike the smell of a gingerbread man, the smell of sex depends on cultural context. In the 50s, Marilyn Monroe famously said that she wore nothing but Chanel No. 5 to bed.
They ask you questions like, what do you wear to bed? You wear a pajama top, the bottoms of the pajamas, or the nightgown, or... So I said Chanel No. 5, because it's the truth.
And before 1998, Chanel No. 5 contained civet. The reason why post-1998 you no longer find this ingredient in perfume is because you obtain it from the anal glands of exotic cats. It's cat bum juice. Bum juice that, when diluted, it actually smells warm, musky and sweet, reflecting the depictions of sex that existed at the time. But the semantics of sex changed in the 80s and 90s. The AIDS epidemic reshaped how we viewed sex, and as it follows, how we marketed perfume. In 1994, Calvin Klein released CK1, a sterile, frosted glass bottle and transparent liquid. Is it any wonder that instead of perfume smelling animalic or primal, it now smells of Sif? Whilst they smell entirely different, they are portrayed very similarly.
The sexy one.
Perfume hasn't always smelt the same, but it has always smelt of sex. So with that, take what you will. Lynx smells like a 16-year-old boy, Glossier smells like a social media marketing intern, CK1 smells like a kitchen. What smells like you? And that is everything we have time for today. I really hope you enjoyed that. I really hope to see you here very incredibly soon. Do come again. If anyone is wondering, my favourite scents are white florals. Do tell me what your favourite scent is. Do tell me if you own Glossier, Baccarat Rouge, Labo, or the like. I will be interested.
Oh. Ah. That's it, I'm not going.